From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for the Red Zone, the Hoops edition. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OU beat writer Joe Masato. Guys, it's time to talk some Sooner basketball. And Joe, obviously Bedlam coming up on Saturday in Norman, a big chance for Oklahoma to get a first Big 12 conference win. But you went to Kansas where Sooners played on Wednesday night, and they didn't win, Joe, but I was as impressed in that loss as I think maybe any loss I've seen the Sooners have in a while. What stood out to you? Yeah,
I think their stock went up even in that loss. The thing that stood out to me most was, throughout that game, they got off to a 7-0 run to start the game. It looked like they had some real momentum. Kansas talent sort of prevailed. The crowd sort of prevailed. They went on a 15-0 run. Then they went on a 10-2 run. And Oklahoma, they just kept chipping back. They got it all the way to a 4-point game with less than 30 seconds left, which was kind of an ideal spot for the Sooners, who were almost a double-digit underdog in that game. And for a team that has so many new faces, I think you saw that even with those new faces, it's still a very veteran group because you've got some new grad transfers. So my main takeaway was that, they didn't seem really rattled, and we've seen a lot of teams go into that building and be rattled.
Definitely so. Yeah, that can get overwhelming fast. Barry, Joe mentioned the fact that, they did give up some runs to Kansas, as most teams do at Allen Fieldhouse. But defensively, this seems like pretty stout team. And, they are without Jamuni McNeace, who we'll talk about in a second. But why has their defense been so good this year in your estimation?
Well, I mean, I don't, addition by subtraction. Trey Young brought incredible offense, but he wasn't terribly committed to defense. That's going to be an upgrade. But those new wing guys get with it pretty good on defense. Reynolds and Calixte and and Doolittle's playing tougher than he's ever played before. I've been really impressed with him. And McNeace has been really good. Now, they didn't have him at KU, and the Jayhawks hurt him inside. Yeah. I'd like to have seen that game played with a healthy Jamuni McNeace. So, sometimes just the commitment to defense. And the way they're playing is it's paying off. So when you try to sell defense to guys and it works, it's easier to sell the next game or the next practice. So it's going well, and I like this team a lot, and I liked what I saw out of them at Fog Alley.
I know that Lon Kruger would also have liked to have seen that game with a healthy Jamuni McNeace. Joe, what do you point to as the defensive reasons behind this team being pretty darn good on the defensive end?
Well, I think their main thing is their length, and then Lon Kruger is comfortable with them basically switching everything. I mean, you've got a lot of guys that even, they're definitely stronger with McNeace inside, but when he's not out, you've got guys in the post like Brady Manick, Christian Doolittle, Rashard Odoms off the bench, who might be the best defender on this team. Those guys can get out and guard wings. They can guard in the post. Now, they might struggle against a guy like Azubuike at Kansas, who's a 7-foot load in there, but they're not going to face too many of those guys. It's just the energy they bring, and especially with Calixte and Reynolds, like Barry talked about, on the perimeter, it just seems like they've all bought in. Right now, they're a top 10 defense in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency. They were 85th last year, so a huge jump.
You talked about Jamuni. We've sort of danced around this. It sounds like he may be available for Bedlam, Joe. This has obviously been sort of a day-to-day situation, but has there been any frustration either with, by him or the team just kind of trying to work through this whole thing?
Yeah, definitely a frustration. You don't really see an ankle sprain keep a guy out for about a month, but he missed 2 games in early December. Then he came back, played about 10, 15 minutes, and then you saw Northwestern. He played in the first half, missed the whole second half. You saw Kansas. They said he was doubtful. He gave it a go in warm-ups, played just 2 minutes in the first half. Talked to him Friday afternoon after practice, and he said this is the best he's ever felt. He's practiced the last 2 days. I wouldn't expect him to be back in the starting lineup tomorrow, but it seems like he said he's pain-free now. It's just a matter of getting back into conditioning shape and really the confidence of telling himself that his ankle is okay and that he can trust it.
How much of a difference, Barry, you mentioned when he's been out there, he's been pretty stout for them. How much of a difference can a healthy Jamuni make to this team moving forward?
Well, depending on the opponent, he's vital. They can't beat Kansas in a big game without him. They just don't have the size. Kansas has the 2 big guys that are really good. They need at least one counter to that, and McNeace is that. Against a team like Oklahoma State, which doesn't have a lot inside, you don't need him as bad. But especially when you get to a postseason where you play, if you keep winning, you play different teams, different kinds of teams, night after night. You need an all-around, lots of different kinds of weapons. McNeace gives you that. There's really nobody like him. People they bring off the bench, they miss the JUCO guy's injured. I forgot his name, but he's gone. He's gone after injury. Matt Freeman is he's a big guy, but he's really not much of a defender. The Finnish guy, everybody loves Paula, but he's not really a banger. Or maybe that's all he is just somebody to get in the way. McNeace is 6'11" and can jump through the roof, has great timing on blocked shots, and has developed an offensive game. He is a legitimately impactful college center. And a lot of teams don't have that, and it puts you a step above if you do.
Joe, this seems almost silly to ask, but is a healthy Jamuni McNeace, is he a bigger impact on defense or offense? Because they have been pretty good defensively without him.
Right.
As Barry mentioned, who you're going up against might determine the answer to that, but do they need him more defense or offense?
I think it is defensively, but they do need him offensively as well. They changed a lot what they do. You see them, they play the ball through the post quite a bit. They trust him as being a pretty good passer out of the post. They have a lot of shooters this year, and Christian James, Calixte can really shoot at Brady Manick. So if you get the ball into McNeace in the post, he attracts so much attention because he's usually bigger than whoever he's up against. Sometimes they double. He can kick it out. Aaron Calixte talked about this after practice today that, for the first time, he was driving into the lane during practice, lobbed it up to the rim. McNeace was there to slam it down. He said he wouldn't have thought about doing that had McNeace not been on the floor. So that's just one simple way he can change the game. All
right, guys. After that Kansas game earlier this week, now it's time for Bedlam. You go from the 14-time defending conference champ to your in-state rival. And Joe, what's your feeling about what Oklahoma has to do to get this win on Saturday? It's in Norman. They've had some struggles with Oklahoma State and Norman, which is kind of odd, but what's important in your mind for the Sooners against the Cowboys?
I think the biggest thing is limiting the three-point shot. Oklahoma State shoots it really well, but to counter that point, Oklahoma is one of the best defensive defending the three-point line. For other teams, you saw Kansas really struggle. I mean, if Kansas didn't have those bigs, they would have been in trouble, I think, against the Sooners. So defending that three-point line, but it's really it's weird to say it's so crucial, second game of the conference season, but I really do think it's an important game because after already losing a game at Kansas, you have Oklahoma State at home. Well, then you go on the road at Texas Tech. If you don't get a win here Saturday, you're really looking maybe at an 0-3 start to the conference slate.
Well, Joe just read my mind, Barry, because this is a tough start to the conference play, as he mentioned. And, Tech, which was so great a year ago, and you thought, well, maybe that was one time. Looks like Chris Beard has got those guys going great, and that's a challenging place to go play no matter how good the Red Raiders are. What's the level of must-win in your mind for the Sooners after such a good non-conference to win this conference game on Saturday against OSU?
Well, I mean, you go from the hardest game in the conference at Kansas to what looks like the easiest game, home against Oklahoma State. The Cowboys were picked 10th. Really, nothing has shown us that's not a solid slot for OSU. So, and then, like you said, Texas Tech's probably the second toughest game at Lubbock in the conference. So you got to have it if you want to finish high. It doesn't kill your season. If you lose, it's just an indicator. This team is not who we thought it was. Good teams don't lose at home to the worst team in the league. So this is one of those taking care of business type of games. For the Sooners, and you need those every once in a while just to find out if your team is legit, and we'll find out.
Joe, lastly, as we mentioned, non-conference, Sooners were so good, so much better than I think anybody expected them to be. As they launch into Big 12 play, I know everybody's always thinking in terms of, well, how many Big 12 games do you have to win? Do you have a sense with the strength of schedule that the Sooners have, which was really good, just all of the factors coming out of non-conference? I mean, if they go 500 in the league, are they looking great for the NCAA? What's sort of your feeling about those sort of sliding marks for the Sooners?
Yeah, the Big 12's not as strong, at least it doesn't look like so far as they were last year. But if the Sooners go 500 in league play, I think they're a virtual lock to make the tournament, given how strong their conference schedule was. They racked up some really quality wins. Their only loss in the non-conference was to a ranked Wisconsin team, so that doesn't hurt them at all. But the way this team is playing, I think after Kansas and after Texas Tech, maybe Iowa State's the third best team, maybe Oklahoma's the third best team. But I think, you know, as the season goes on, you could finish anywhere from third to sixth or seventh, but I think even that might be good enough to still get them in the tournament.
All right, again, Bedlam on Saturday. It's 1 o'clock down in Norman if you're headed that way. TV also, all sorts of stuff. We'll have all the coverage of that game, as well as that big Texas Tech game coming up next week for the Sooners. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com every day in the Oklahoman.